All right.
Does that need to go up, or is it already up?
No, that's up. Okay. So move that car real quick. Push it out. Push this one in.
November 13th, 2022, Moscow, Idaho. Sometime after 4 a.m., inside a quiet, off-campus student house near the University of Idaho, 4 college students were stabbed to death. The victims were 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves, 21-year-old Madison Mogen, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. What made the case even more terrifying, investigators believed the killer entered the house while some of the roommates were still awake. According to court documents, one surviving roommate later told police she heard strange noises during the night, opened her bedroom door multiple times, and eventually came face to face with a masked man dressed in black walking through the house. Then he disappeared into the darkness. For weeks, fear spread across the country. Parents pulled students out of school. Rumors exploded online, and police faced enormous pressure as the case became one of the most talked about murder investigations in America.
On the evening of November 12, 2022, Moscow, Idaho looked completely normal. The small college town, located near the border of Washington state, was known for being quiet, peaceful, and safe. Home to the University of Idaho, the area was filled with students, late-night restaurants, football weekends, and off-campus parties. For many students, it was the kind of town where people rarely locked their doors. And that Saturday night felt no different. Students packed bars near downtown Moscow. Friends moved between parties. Music echoed through fraternity houses. Cars lined the streets near campus as people celebrated another weekend before Thanksgiving break. At the center of that normal college atmosphere was a 3-story house on King Road. The home was well known in the student community. Friends frequently visited. Lights were often on late into the night. Multiple roommates lived there, and according to people who knew the house, it was a social place where students regularly came and went.
Inside that house lived 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves and her close friend Madison Mogen. Kaylee was preparing for a major new chapter in her life. According to reports, she had recently accepted a job in Texas and had returned to Moscow that weekend to spend time with friends and show Maddie her new vehicle before moving away. Friends described Maddie as outgoing, kind, and deeply connected to the people around her. She and Kaylee had been close friends for years, and on that night, they spent much of their time together. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend, 20-year-old Ethan Chapin, attended a Sigma Chi fraternity party not far from campus. Ethan, one of triplets, was known for his easygoing personality and close relationship with his siblings. Xana was remembered by friends as energetic, confident, and caring. Like hundreds of other college students that night, they were simply enjoying the weekend.
As the hours passed, downtown Moscow remained active. Security footage and witness accounts later showed Kaylee and Maddie visiting the Corner Club, a popular bar in the city, before stopping at a nearby food truck shortly after 1:40 a.m. In the now widely viewed food truck footage, the two friends appeared relaxed. They laughed, spoke with people nearby, waited for their order, and blended into the normal rhythm of a late college night. Nothing in those final public moments suggested fear. Nothing appeared unusual. At around the same time, Xana and Ethan were still believed to be at the fraternity gathering before eventually making their way back toward the King Road home. One by one, the house slowly became quiet. By approximately 2 a.m., investigators believed everyone had returned home. The lights inside the King Road house began turning off. The streets outside grew quieter. And for a brief moment, everything appeared completely normal. But sometime after 4 a.m., that normal college night would turn into one of the most shocking murder cases in modern American history. At approximately 4 a.m., 20-year-old Xana Kernodle reportedly received a DoorDash food order at the house. Investigators would later discover that Zaina was still awake around that time and had been using TikTok on her phone at approximately 4:12 a.m. That detail immediately changed investigators' understanding of the night, because for weeks, many people assumed everyone inside the house had been asleep during the attacks. But according to court documents, that may not have been the case. One of the surviving roommates, later identified in legal filings as DM, told investigators she had been asleep on the second floor when she suddenly woke up after hearing noises coming from upstairs. At first, she thought she heard Kaylee Goncalves playing with her dog on the third floor, but moments later, she heard something else. According to the probable cause affidavit, DM recalled hearing what sounded like one of the roommates say, "There's someone here." Investigators later believed the voice may actually have belonged to Zana. Inside the house, confusion was beginning to spread. DM told investigators she opened her bedroom door once, but didn't see anything unusual. Then she closed it again. A short time later, she said she heard crying coming from Zana's room. And then, according to investigators, she heard a male voice say something that sounded like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Outside the home, nearby security cameras captured disturbing audio around 4:17 a.m. Investigators later stated the recordings included sounds consistent with whimpering, a loud thud, and a dog barking repeatedly. Inside the King Road house, the situation was becoming terrifying. DM later told investigators she opened her bedroom door a third time. As the sun rose over Moscow, Idaho on the morning of November 13th, 2022, nobody yet understood the scale of what had happened inside the King Road house. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was finally placed from one of the surviving roommates' phones, requesting help for what was initially described as an unconscious person. But when officers arrived at the home near the University of Idaho campus, they discovered something far worse. Inside the house, investigators found 4 students brutally stabbed to death. The victims, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zaina Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. News of the murders spread almost instantly, and in a town where violent crime was rare, fear began taking over. Students started locking their doors. Parents rushed to bring their children home from campus. Rumors flooded social media. And online, thousands of people became obsessed with the case almost overnight. But behind the scenes, investigators faced a major problem. They didn't have a suspect. They didn't publicly identify a murder weapon. And they didn't immediately explain how someone could enter a house filled with multiple people, kill 4 students, and seemingly vanish without waking the entire neighborhood. As days passed, pressure on law enforcement intensified. National media crews arrived in Moscow. News helicopters circled above the neighborhood. Every small update became breaking news. And online, speculation exploded. People analyzed food truck footage frame by frame. Internet forums accused innocent people. TikTok creators developed theories. Some believed the killer had to know the victims personally. Others feared a random predator was still somewhere in the community. And through all of it, police remained unusually careful with information. That silence only increased public fear. Then, on November 16th, investigators revealed a critical detail. The victims had likely been attacked with a fixed-blade knife while they were asleep or in bed. But even with that information, there was still no public suspect, no arrest, no clear motive. And as the investigation entered its second week, many people began wondering whether the killer had somehow escaped without leaving evidence behind. Then, investigators discovered something outside the house that would dramatically shift the direction of the case: surveillance footage. As detectives collected security video from nearby homes and businesses, they noticed a vehicle repeatedly appearing near the King Road neighborhood during the early morning hours of November 13th, a white Hyundai Elantra. According to investigators, the car was seen driving near the house multiple times between approximately 3:29 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. And suddenly, the investigation had its first major lead. On December 7th, 2022, police publicly announced they were searching for information about a white Hyundai Elantra believed to have been near the scene during the time frame of the murders. That announcement changed everything. Across the country, people began searching for white Elantras.
Tips flooded into law enforcement. The internet became consumed with one question: who was driving that car? But investigators were already moving deeper into the evidence.
According to later court documents, law enforcement had begun tracing phone activity connected to the area surrounding the King Road house, and one cell phone number quickly caught investigators' attention. Records later showed that a phone allegedly connected to Bryan Kohberger had been near the victim's residence multiple times before the murders. Investigators would later claim the phone had visited the area around the house on numerous occasions in the months leading up to November 13th. And according to prosecutors, the same phone appeared to stop reporting to the cellular network during the exact time frame investigators believed the murders occurred. Then, shortly after 4:48 a.m., the phone allegedly became active again south of Moscow. The pieces were beginning to connect: a white Hyundai Elantra, cell phone movements, surveillance footage, and a timeline that investigators believed pointed toward one individual. But the most important discovery in the entire investigation still hadn't been revealed yet. As investigators continued analyzing surveillance footage, cell phone records, and vehicle movements throughout November and December of 2022, attention slowly began focusing on one man, 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger. At the time of the murders, Kohberger was a criminology PhD student at Washington State University, located just minutes away from Moscow, Idaho. According to reports, he had previously studied psychology and criminal justice before beginning doctoral studies focused on criminology and criminal behavior. That detail alone immediately captured public attention, because suddenly the case no longer felt like just another murder investigation. People began asking disturbing questions. Why would someone studying criminal behavior allegedly become connected to one of the most shocking murder cases in America? And did his academic background influence the way investigators viewed him? As media coverage intensified, online discussions surrounding Kohberger exploded. Former classmates described him as intelligent, but sometimes socially distant. Others recalled moments where he appeared highly focused on crime, psychology, and the way criminals think. At the same time, internet users uncovered an old online survey reportedly connected to Kohberger years earlier while he was studying criminal justice. The survey asked former criminals detailed questions about their emotions, thoughts, and experiences during crimes. Almost instantly, the internet began building theories around it. But investigators were focused on something much more important: evidence. According to court filings, cell phone data allegedly showed Kohberger's phone near the King Road residence multiple times before the murders. Prosecutors later claimed the visits often occurred late at night or early in the morning. That detail became one of the most debated parts of the case. Why was the phone allegedly near the house so many times? Was he familiar with the area? Had the victims been specifically targeted? Or was there another explanation entirely?
As December approached, investigators continued quietly monitoring Kohberger's movements, and while the country remained focused on the mystery unfolding in Idaho, Kohberger himself had already left Washington State. In mid-December 2022, he traveled across the country with his father from Washington to Pennsylvania in the same white Hyundai Elantra investigators had been tracking. What Kohberger reportedly didn't know was that investigators and federal agents were now watching closely. According to later reports, law enforcement tracked the vehicle during the cross-country trip while continuing to build their case behind the scenes. And as public pressure intensified, investigators believed they were getting closer to identifying the killer. But the breakthrough that would change everything was still coming. Because according to prosecutors, investigators had already discovered one critical piece of evidence left behind inside the King Road house. An item that, they believed, connected Bryan Kohberger directly to the crime.
By late December 2022, investigators believed the Idaho murders investigation was finally reaching a turning point. For weeks, the public had seen only fragments of the case: surveillance footage, rumors, cell phone records, and the mystery surrounding the white Hyundai Elantra. But behind the scenes, investigators were now focusing on a single piece of evidence they believed could connect everything together: a knife sheath. According to court documents, investigators discovered a tan leather K-bar knife sheath lying beside the bodies of Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves inside the third-floor bedroom. On the button snap of that sheath, investigators later identified a single source of male DNA. That discovery would become the breakthrough that changed the entire investigation. Because until that moment, the case had largely been built on movements, timelines, and circumstantial patterns. Now, investigators potentially had something far more powerful: biological evidence. At the same time, analysts continued reconstructing the timeline surrounding the white Hyundai Elantra. Security footage from multiple locations allegedly showed the vehicle leaving Pullman, Washington during the early morning hours of November 13th, before repeatedly circling the King Road neighborhood.
Then, shortly after the estimated time of the murders, the car was allegedly seen rapidly leaving the area. As investigators layered cell phone data, surveillance footage, vehicle movements, and forensic evidence together, the pressure around one name continued building: Bryan Kohberger. But investigators still needed confirmation, and according to later reports, that confirmation may have come thousands of miles away from Idaho. On December 15, 2022, Kohberger and his father arrived in Pennsylvania after completing their cross-country drive from Washington state. By that point, investigators were already watching. According to reports, the FBI had been coordinating surveillance as Kohberger stayed at his family home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Then came another critical moment in the investigation: trash recovery. According to the probable cause affidavit, investigators secretly collected trash from the Kohberger family residence and submitted it for forensic testing.
The results, investigators said, showed that DNA taken from the trash indicated a biological relationship to the DNA profile recovered from the knife sheath found at the crime scene. To investigators, the pieces were now aligning. And once that happened, events moved quickly. In the early morning hours of December 30th, 2022, law enforcement agents surrounded the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania. After more than 6 weeks of fear, speculation, and nationwide attention, investigators were finally ready to make an arrest. At approximately 1:30 a.m., FBI agents and Pennsylvania State Police executed the operation. Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody and charged in connection with the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. The news exploded across the country. For weeks, people had asked, who could commit a crime this brutal? Now, the face of the investigation was suddenly everywhere: a criminology PhD student. But even after the arrest, some of the biggest questions in the entire case still remained unanswered. Why that house? Why those victims? And according to prosecutors, if the sheath had never been left behind, would investigators ever have found him at all? In the months that followed, the investigation moved from police reports and media headlines into the courtroom. Early hearings were held in Latah County, Idaho, where the murders had taken place. Cameras lined the courthouse entrances. Reporters crowded the streets outside. Every court appearance became national news. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors began outlining the evidence they believed connected Kohberger to the murders: cell phone records, surveillance footage, vehicle movements, and DNA allegedly recovered from the knife sheath found beside 2 of the victims. Leading the prosecution was Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson. Representing Kohberger was defense attorney Ann Taylor, who quickly became one of the central figures in the legal fight surrounding the case. And from the very beginning, the defense pushed back aggressively. Defense attorneys challenged DNA procedures, cell phone analysis, evidence handling, and the enormous amount of media attention surrounding the investigation. Because by that point, the Idaho murders case had become one of the most heavily discussed criminal cases in America. Podcasts dissected every hearing. TikTok creators analyzed body language. YouTube channels built entire timelines around the evidence.
And online speculation became so intense, the defense eventually argued that Kohberger could no longer receive a fair trial in the area where the murders occurred. Then came another major turning point. In September 2024, a judge approved a change of venue request, moving the case out of Latah County due to concerns over overwhelming publicity and the difficulty of selecting an impartial jury. The proceedings were later transferred to Boise, Idaho. That decision alone showed how enormous the case had become.
This was no longer just a local murder investigation. It had turned into a national obsession. As hearings continued, legal experts debated the strength of the DNA evidence, the reliability of cell phone mapping, and whether prosecutors truly had enough to prove motive. For years, many people expected the case to end with a massive televised murder trial. On July 2nd, 2025, in a shocking development that stunned many people following the case, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 4 murders and burglary charges as part of a plea agreement with prosecutors. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to remove the death penalty from consideration. The reaction was immediate. Some families supported the agreement because it guaranteed conviction and avoided years of appeals. Others wanted a full public trial. Many people online felt frustrated that after years of national attention, some of the biggest questions might never fully be answered in court.
Then, on July 23, 2025, inside a Boise courtroom overseen by Judge Stephen Hippler, Bryan Kohberger was formally sentenced. The sentence? 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. For the families of the victims, the sentencing marked another painful chapter in a case that had already transformed their lives forever. But even after the guilty plea, the psychological mystery surrounding the case remained. Because unlike many criminal cases, the Idaho murders never provided the public with a complete emotional explanation. There was no dramatic courtroom confession, no fully detailed motive, no simple answer capable of making the horror understandable. Instead, the case left behind something far more unsettling. The idea that on an ordinary college weekend, inside a normal student home, while friends laughed, texted, ordered food, and prepared for bed, something horrifying was unfolding quietly in the dark. And perhaps that is why the Idaho murders continue to haunt so many people. And even now, years later, the questions surrounding the Idaho murders still haven't fully disappeared. This has been True Crime Exposed. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.